with this, so they'll be guiding you and everything. What we're gonna do is Shelley's gonna talk about the place, I'm gonna speak, I'll give you guys a little bit of a small little presentation, and then we will break down into 2 groups for tonight to investigate. And we got a lot of places to investigate, so it's gonna be cool.
We will hit all the hot spots in the jail that we all get paranormal activity nearly every time we're in the building, and that's no joke. Well, you were getting stuff already tonight.
I went to go use the restroom, and when I came out of the restroom, I heard like this little girl giggle. Oh, and
You saw
I just felt something on my neck. I thought you guys were messing with me.
Oh, jeez.
So I guess I'm getting attention from that. But I see a little girl at the end of the stairs and goes racing up. So when I come in, do you guys have like a child here? Because I just saw a child go right up.
Wow.
Yes, we do.
And then she was showing me the cells, and all of a sudden I hear this woman screaming coming from upstairs.
Oh, they're out
And
here.
I said, there's a woman screaming from upstairs.
Yeah.
And then she just told me something about that. So
Mhm.
already there's a couple things that are happening, which is kind of cool.
And you haven't been anywhere but out here so far. Yeah.
Be prepared. Ooh,
So,
I'm
yeah.
I'm
excited.
excited. I am so excited.
We're reaching out.
Yes, they are, and I'm so excited you're here because maybe you're gonna get some more of these names I've been trying to tug on.
We'll ask.
Oh,
We'll
nice.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah. You ready to go? You ready to start?
Let's get going.
All right, well, he introduced me. My name is Shelley, and I'm the owner of the building. I bought it in 2015. When I first bought the building, I wasn't so sure I wanted to buy it. My brother here, who's also one of my team members, he was begging me to come look at it, and I'm like, man, you know what? This place is probably falling down because it's over 100 years old. So I'm like, look, okay, I'll go look at it, but I'm not gonna promise anything, right? The owners, there was a historical restoration company. They were out of Tampa, Florida, and they let it leak through the grapevine. They were looking to sell because they're in Florida and they can't keep maintaining and upgrading the building, you know, restoring it. They had been up in Ohio doing work to all the historical buildings, and when work was finished, they went back to Florida. So I'm like, okay, I'll go look at it. It was so filled with stuff. All the water lines were blown. No heat, no cooling, no water lines, no electric, no nothing, and it was full of junk. So I'm like, but the nuts and bolts here, they're pretty sound, so I think we can clean it up, and I had plans on using it for office space for my team. That's what I thought, because a lot of my paranormal team is up this way. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I was raised in Van Wert, Ohio, which is the next county over. But I have a lot of team up here. Most of my team are scattered across Ohio and just over the border in Indiana. So I'm like, okay, central office area, it'll be great. I'll restore the building, it'll be a cool project. First day in, me and my brother come in, very first day after buying it. There's no electric, no nothing. We come in, I'm like, oh, look at all this stuff. There was just all kinds of stuff. So we're in the first floor cell block, and I'm like, okay, where do we want to start? And we're looking around, and I'm like, We hear a lady's voice come over the intercom system, and we look at each other, and I'm like, did you hear that? He's like, I did hear that. What was that? What'd she say? I'm like, it happened so fast, and I was so shocked. I don't even know what she said. And then we heard the hard-soled shoes, the phantom footsteps walking in the hall, and I'm stepping out, and I'm like, what the heck? You know what? Plans have just changed. Plans have just changed. We are going to restore the building, and it's obviously haunted, and we're going to turn it into a paranormal research center. So, thank you all, first of all, for coming tonight, because some of the proceeds go to the restorations of the building.
Yay.
So, yeah, give your own selves a hand, yes. So, time went on, and I've got to know many of the spirits in the building on a very, very intimate and personal basis. They're like my buddies, you might want to say. So, there are a few rules. I'll just start off with that. No provoking. They will interact with you. Just be yourselves and nice and polite and friendly. They know you're coming tonight. I've already had the talk, so they interact better if you're nice, just like anybody out on the street, you know what I mean? So no provoking, no sage, no holy water, no chanting, no prayers in the building. If you want to do a protection prayer, you're more than welcome to do it outside before you leave, because people have been followed home. I'm not going to lie about that. If you find that you are followed home by anything, just tell them to go back to the jail. They always go back. They always go back. There's nobody here, our resident spirits, that is, I'm not going to say they're not, pull pranks and stuff, but they're not actually evil, okay? They're not demons, all right? The resident spirits are not demons. Now, some of the transients, we've been cussed out before, you never know. But the resident spirits, those are most likely who will follow you, and they're nice. Just tell them to go back and they will. I think everybody's been, have you been followed yet, Lori?
No, they don't like me.
Lori's been here a few times, and Jenny's been here a few times. So I'm glad you made it back tonight. This is going to be a special night. So anyway, so here is the big story about the jail. It was built in 1876, and at that time, it took 2 years to build, and it was built for $25,000, okay? What's crazy is, I got it for not much less than that. Back in 2015, right? But it was the most secure jail of its time, and it is the oldest building in Paulding County, and one of the oldest buildings in the state of Ohio. Now, there's all kinds of stuff that surrounds this building and surrounds Paulding County, okay? Paulding County is a village. It's always stayed a village because they won't let it expand. They won't let it grow. The people here, they're really nice to me. They're kind. But will they tell me anything? Absolutely not. Tight-knit, tight-lipped, right? Anything I find out to do with the building, the jail, the old cases, I've had to dig and pry because they are not going to tell me, right? They are just into themselves, and they won't let the town grow. They want to keep it, they don't have to follow lots of municipality laws if they remain a village, and that's the way they want to keep it. The county's huge. It's a farming community, right? But I get along with them. They're nice to me, but I have to find things out on my own, okay? Back in the 50s and 60s, this jail, or this town, was one of the highest in the whole state and in the United States for unsolved murders. Rumor has it that the sheriff was in cahoots with the mob, and he allowed them to dump their bodies outside of town. That's why there was so many unsolved murders. So I've talked to the sheriff, and many times. Sheriff Keeler, he's supposed to be responsible. He was the reigning sheriff during some of them times. He tells me that it's all lies. So, I don't know. But I do ask him tough questions, but I don't provoke him, right? So we do talk. He is the dominant in the building. So he shares his space with me, and if you respect him, he respects everyone else. There is one instance where my brother here, Toby, who is also going to be one of the guides tonight, he was kind of provoking the sheriff. And I always told him, you need to show respect because that's the kind of guy he was, right? And, good old boys, they take the law into their own hands. I've always knew this about the sheriff. Plus, I've got a lot of people talk to me and they tell me that, he would beat people up and stuff before, right? So I'm like, I already know what kind of fella he is. No nonsense kind of guy, right? He was provoking him one time and he got grabbed by the neck and shoved back in the 3rd floor. And he left the 3rd floor and he didn't want to go back for a while, like many days. And I'm like, I told you. Because you hear his hard-soled shoes walking around. You can hear his disembodied voice. He talks out. He knows what's going on in the world. He knows Trump's president right now. He knows about the pandemic. I have conversations with the sheriff just about everyday life, all the time. We're buddies. And he does come around throughout the building, but he stays on the 3rd floor a lot. He's up there a lot. And he shares his space with me, that's what I say. He knows I'm fixing up the place, and I have a lot of respect, and you get more, you'll get more response with honey than you do with vinegar. Exactly. Plus we have children spirits in the building, so if you go yelling and hollering, you know what they do? They run and hide. We don't want them to run and hide because they're fun. They'll play with all your meter lights and they'll sing and they do all kinds of really good stuff. So yeah, provoking just makes them hide. But anyway, so some of the things that happened in the building, right? Jail was built in 1976, the most secure of its time. Sheriff Keeler was the longest reigning sheriff of the building, even to this day, and he's still here. There's a fella named Gus, and he was a jailer. His whole career was here. He's a Mexican man. He spoke Spanish. Sometimes we get Spanish EVPs, and you'll hear him jingling keys, whistling. He walks around, does these rounds in the cell blocks, and sometimes he has said that things are not so fun with me around, and sometimes we'll go to talk to him. Last week, Tobe said something to Gus in there, and he called him a culo. And if anybody speaks Spanish, you know what that is. Yep. So, so he swears at us sometimes, but he's not. Yeah, he's not like he won't hurt you, but he does speak bad sometimes. But I can't speak Spanish, so sometimes I have to get some of his big long paragraphs like translated because he does. Does anybody speak Spanish tonight?
A little bit.
Yay, that's fabulous. Fabulous. I love that because maybe you can get Gus to talk. He can speak English, but he does speak in Spanish a lot of times. So the 1st floor cell block, you will visit that area tonight. You're going to visit every hot spot in the building, and the 1st floor cell block, out in front of it, a lot of things happen. Things get tossed around. Many ghosts walk back and forth. I actually have a single camera that I run there a lot of times just to record the activity in that area because it is so active. I have its own separate from our DVR systems, and we have like cameras everywhere. Back in 1998, there was a fellow named Gary Murray. He was found hanged in the 1st floor cell block. And I've always suspected that there was foul play, and I know I'm correct from what all of the other spirits said. There's some controversy going on there on his death. He was found at 7:20 in the morning during breakfast rounds, which breakfast was supposed to be earlier than that, at 6:30. And we have found out from the spirits that it wasn't totally his fault for his suicide, right? Supposedly suicide. But there's other extenuating circumstances revolving around his death. And you can talk to him in the 1st floor cell block. He makes himself known. And his presence is really overpowering during the month of July, the end of July, during his anniversary time. Other than that, he pops in here and there throughout the year, but he is in there full-fledged, full force in July's, isn't he? You've been here for a couple of those. His name is Gary Murray. He was only in jail for 5 days over his child support case, and he was being held for Van Wert County. I found out that he had been to the hospital 2 days prior, and I can't find out why, because those records no longer exist. We don't know any other circumstances surrounding his death. So, he was only in here for a child support case. He had a great job. He was married. He was from Alabama. So, I'm working on that one because I don't think that's quite right. then we have this fella named Charles Hart. This is so, Charlie shows up every once in a while. When Charlie shows up, we've had the whole cell block vibrate. It's just so crazy. He was a 17-year-old fella back in 1895. He murdered 2 children in town. He took this little girl, she was 6 years old. He was raping her, and the 9-year-old brother come up on the scene, right, and caught them. So he disemboweled them both, and nearly cut their heads off also, threw them in a pile of brush, and set them on fire. Yes. This fella was held here in the Paulding jail, and he admitted to his crime, and he was set for execution. And back in that time, the counties were responsible for their own executions, right? Well, I've read in all the papers, I'm trying to find out more information about this, right? So there was angry mobs forming about him being here, and then of course the crime he committed, because that's just horrendous, right? There was angry mobs with their fire sticks and everything coming to the jail. Sheriff, who was Edward Staley at the time, he got wind of it. And supposedly, this is how it's written in the paper, but you know how these towns are. He whisked Charles Hart out the back into a waiting carriage and took him to Columbus, where he was executed. Wow. Okay, I have a problem with that. So I went to the Ohio State Reformatory website because I have to dig around. That's just what I do. And they say that he was executed here. So I think the angry mob got him, you know what I mean? Vigilante justice, because he was going to stop Grandpa and Uncle and Daddy from hurting him, you know what I mean? Really, back in them times, 1895? Yeah. But he shows up here, he likes the blonde ladies, he likes the whiskey, and we'll see if he comes around tonight. So we move on to the second floor cell block, and you know what we have up there? We have all the shadow people, disembodied voices. We get transients that visit us up there, a fella named Steve, who has a little boy named Matt. They come an awful lot, and they are so much fun. Little Matt, he's too young to count, but he will play with all your meters and lights, and he has a good time. And then, you know, we go to the basement. Of course, there's a lot of stuff surrounding the basement. We get visits from several spirits down there, and one of which is Nancy Eagleson, who was a 15-year-old girl that was murdered in 1960, and her case is still unsolved to this day. A restoration company who bought the jail saved it from demolition in 2013. Well, they got the plans to the building, and they started to do some work, and they found the false walls in the basement. They found the cells, so they opened up the catwalks, opened up some of the cells, and voila, what was in one of the cells, bricked over and bricked over, some of the evidence from that cold case file, the shoe from Nancy Eagleson and a piece of her dress. Well, BCI was in here for a week, and they sent all that stuff to the crime lab, only the DNA was too degraded and they couldn't come up with anything on them. So we talk to Nancy in the basement sometimes, and her mother passed last year, and she's come and visited us also. I was so hoping that we could get answers from the spirits to help solve this case for her mother before she passed, but we did not. We did not get. We have somebody that visits that says they did it, but we don't know who it is yet, right? We're still working on it. So I'm hoping to get a name and finally make somebody responsible for this case. So maybe tonight, maybe Chris will get some information on that. I am so excited that he's here, I tell you what. So then, we also get a fella by the name Frank Tracy. This town, it being as small as it is, still has lots of murders in it, believe it or not. It's a village. We had a murder case just across the alley in 2016. A fella named Frank Tracy and his girlfriend Hannah Fisher were brutally murdered. And Frank comes and visits us sometimes, and he talks to us in the basement. We asked him about his girlfriend Hannah, and he said she went to heaven. So we're like, okay, Frank, so why are you still here? And he said, I've done bad things. So we're like, well, as long as you're respectful, you can come and visit us here. We're good with that. You can come and talk. So he comes and visits us now again. You've experienced Frank. So, and I don't know, did Frank show up when you were here, Jenny? But he comes now again to Frank Tracy, and believe it or not, we have an Indian that lurks around in the basement. I know it sounds crazy, but you know, this used to be Indian land. All of this. And good old, they were ran off, and you know what happened in these areas, the massacres, and the Indians were ran off. Well, for a long time, a couple of years, we would have investigations, and we would let people come in here and investigate privately, and they would tell me. Some people would say, hey, I gotta tell you this. I seen an Indian in the tunnels, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, you saw an Indian in the tunnels, huh? I had no evidence of this. I'd never seen it, never captured no pictures, nothing. So I'm like, oh, they're probably just thinking that because, you know, Indian land, blah, blah, blah. We'll see what happens. Until I caught the picture of one of the Indians in the basement, and I'm like, well, golly gee, you know. So yes, we do have an Indian that lurks around in the basement, and he looks like a Mohawk warrior, and nobody's ever been hurt, but I don't know if I trust him, you know, because he looks like one of the warriors that sneak around, and you know what they did back then. So I guess he's down there. Then we go to the third floor. Obviously the sheriff is up there a lot, Sheriff Keeler. And up until 1977, the sheriffs lived in the building with their families and the criminals. And then after 77, the sheriffs no longer live in the building. Yes. And I spoke with a gal who is still living that lived in here as a little girl. And it was Sheriff Keeler's daughter. And she said, she's like 73 now. And she said that she remembers times where they had murderers in the cell block, and she would stand on a stool and play checkers through the food hatch with murderers. And I'm like, you weren't scared? And she's like, no, I knew my dad wouldn't let nothing happen. So she was never afraid. So she would check. Yes, it was amazing. I was like, oh my God, you were never scared. She's like, my parents would go out to dinner or go to the theater and stuff, and I'd be here all alone with the prisoners. And I'm like, no way. Yes. I'm like, you're kidding, right? She's like, no. She's like, well, you know, all these other doors locked, so unless she come through to the kitchen to play through the hatch, she's like, I was safe. My dad wouldn't let that happen to me. And I'm like, oh girl, I don't know if I'd be that brave when I was a little kid. Murderers, come on. But it was so interesting talking to her and learning about life in here when living with the prisoners, right? So in the living quarters, which is the front of the building, that's where Sheriff Keeler is a lot of the time. And on the third floor, there's another lady. Her name is Ruby. She talks out, and we have little Audrey. She's the 10-year-old little girl who's been here from the beginning, and she told me it was 1923 for her, and she's 10 years old, and her parents aren't with her, and so I think that's why the sheriff looks after her, because she's all alone. And she used to cower in the attic, and the third floor, the rooms used to be the bedrooms in there, and you're going to see later tonight, you're all going to get a chance to see this. And when the sheriffs no longer lived in the building, they turned one room into evidence room and another room into the communications room. Well, when we found Audrey cowering in the attic all the time, we got a snapshot of her up there. We got her on SLS, and other psychic people's been in here, and the sheriff's always trying to protect her. And I'm like, you know what? She needs a safe place. So we turned the evidence room back into a bedroom. And it's done especially for Audrey, and that's her safe place. So tonight, when you guys are up there, please do not sit on any of her furniture. That's all I ask there. She's in there a lot. She sits at her vanity and swings her legs, looks like she's combing her hair. She is one happy little girl. She likes stuff that lights up. She likes dolls. She likes, oh my gosh, she likes a lot of stuff. Did you bring the bear tonight?
And the Raggedy Ann.
Oh, okay. So I'm sure sometimes she'll sing, sometimes she talks out. You've already had interactions with Audrey tonight. Sweet little girl. So just don't sit on her furniture and I'll be happy. Because that's just, I want her to feel safe. I made this building to be a safe place, and the sheriff is on board. We are so much buddies. You know, if you are respectful in the spirit world, we want this to be a place for anyone that needs a place, you know, to go. If the spirits are respectful, they're welcome here. And the sheriff he's the dominant, and he's welcoming of that. We have a fella that, I'm going to tell you one last story before I turn it over to Chris, because this is so insane. When we got the building in here first weekend, tearing down the ceiling because it was so chipped up out in the kitchen, and we didn't want something falling on somebody. This guy walks in, and he says, "Hi, everybody," and we look around at him, and I'm like, "Hi, who are you?" And he's like, "My name's Bob." And I'm like, "Okay, Bob, can I help you?" He's like, "Well, the previous owners used to let me come in here and investigate when I wanted, the restoration company." And I checked with them, and she's like, "Oh God, yes, we just call him Ghost Bob." So I'm like, "Okay, how you doing, Bob?" Kind of a little freaky, but you know what? He's been our biggest cheerleader. He came nearly every week after that. He became an honorary member of our team, right? Bob loved this building. So we had some conversations. I said, "Bob, this is like," he passed, but he visits still. He's been here. I think Bob just comes with the building, period, right? So we had a conversation like a month before he passed. He's been gone a year in July. I said, "Bob, you know what? If I go before anybody, I'm coming back here because I'm going to try to help figure all this stuff out," right? Bob's like, "If I go first, you know I'm going to come back here. I love this place, blah, blah." I'm like, "Well, let's quit talking about that. None of us want to go anytime soon, right?" So we had a barbecue in July, and he was feeling great. Everything, I have a barbecue every year for my team, just showing appreciation for all their hard work on the building and everything else. And the following Monday, Bob was found dead in his house. And I was devastated, and it seemed so weird because he delivered pizzas for the Marcos here in town, and he would stop every time I was in town, stop on his breaks, stop in between deliveries sometimes, just all the time stop. And I'm like, I miss Bob. But he still comes to visit, so it's all good. Here's one thing I'm learning. And it's kind of crazy because I know some of the spirits can see us. I'm 100% positive of that. They can tell us hair color. They can tell us what we're wearing, all kinds of stuff, right? They can count us out. But I asked Bob one night, I'm like, "Can you see us?" This is like, I don't know, a month after he passed. And he's like, "I can't see you guys, but I can hear you." And this was on the 3rd floor, and we had the lights out. And I'm like, he can't see us. Is there a transition period? What's going on? So I turned the light on. I'm like, "Can you see us now?" He's like, "I can see the table." He told us he could see the table. He still could not see us. And I'm like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" But my husband, Vincent, he saw him out in the hallway, which was really strange. Maybe like as a shadow person, because my husband is very dark skinned. He's African American. He's really dark. And I'm like, he's like, "I can see Vincent." I'm like, "You see Vincent? But you can't see us." So I'm wondering if, I don't know. The last time I talked to Bob last week, he still could not see us, but he could talk to us, so I don't know.
Let's try that, let's ask that tonight.
Yeah.
See if,
Yeah,
if
remind me, or,
yeah, because that's something I'm trying to get some more information about that, like, is there some kind of transition? Because I know the sheriff can see us, I know he can see us, but Bob, he's been gone 1 year, and he still can't see us. Isn't that strange? So does anyone have any questions for me? I will let you all know that I love this place and I do lots of studies. Certified ghost hunter. I've got certifications in criminology and profiling and forensic science and astronomy. And I'm working on parapsychology right now. I'm a claircognizant with regards to people. I only wish I had it with dead people. I only have it with living people, which is so disappointing. But I have it with the dead people, so I'm so excited. You guys have no idea. Like, I can look at you and stuff comes to me. But I am so. I am so
say,
So when I get people that can communicate like that and can do like what I do with living, I'm just so excited. I am so excited. You're welcome. Are you ready for your part?
yeah, this is great.
Yes.
I'm just sitting here because there's so much activity going on. There's a man
It's-
who was just standing right
Yes.
here a second
Oh, yeah.
ago, and I'm like, all right, can't guys wait? I still gotta talk. Stop.
Did it seem like the sheriff? Was he
And it
like?
was very, very tall man.
Yes.
You know, just.
Probably all crowded.
Just
Yeah.
At the store looking at us.
broad shoulders.
They have glasses?
waist.
Yeah,
I
they're
can't
big.
tell. All I'm
Okay.
seeing is just the torso, and I'm like, wow, you're a big guy.
Probably the sheriff. See
So-
what's going on.
You know, I mean, and a lot of you guys know too, is when you just show up in a place, when stuff starts getting active like that, the spirits are like checking you out. They're
Mhm.
like, okay, who is this? Tony?
Who's up there? Oh.
If you've noticed, I kept looking up there.
I saw stuff
Earlier.
up there too.
I'd see
Yeah, I
something
saw
cruise.
it.
And then it's
go
Someone
through,
looking
come
at
back,
us
go-
and they went that way.
I
We'll
found
find out.
stuff up there.
We'll find out.
It was a super shadow, a little guy, and he was right there, and he's looking, and he went that way.
Yeah, very playful.
Yeah, I'm here.
He's not there.
Welcome to the club.
So you're believing what Greta said to you
Oh
now?
my God, yeah.
So now everybody knows.
You guys can see that? I want to thank Shelley for giving us the opportunity to come here and have this investigation. And, everybody from the group as well. And I want to say hi to you. Greta told me to say hi to you.
Yes.
Lori.
Lori, yes.
Lori.
Greta is a good friend.
And Greta is like Chip Coffey's like agent. You always see Chip with, and I've known Greta for years. And I had reached out to her a couple months ago saying, hey Greta, I'm looking for some other places I want to kind of try to squeeze in before the end of the year. And she brought this place up. And I said, all right, well, let me Google it real quick. And I Googled it, I said, all right, let's do it. And that's why we're here. So a big thank you to Greta and of course to Shelley for making this possible.
Thank you.
So,
Yes.
thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome too.